and Instagram. Until then, bye-bye for now.
Good morning. The BBC Fairy Godmother has spoken. You shall go to the ballroom competition.
It's been announced that this year's Strictly will be filmed before a live studio audience, after fears it would have to be recorded behind closed doors because of social distancing rules.
In a moment, we'll speak to one of last year's contestants, Saffron and the TV critic Bryan as well. But first, here's a quick reminder of what makes Strictly and its audience so special.
Have you seen the reaction in this reference?
Joe and Kasia! Calvin and
I walk down the lane with a happy refrain. Everyone knows it's high time. I've been waiting. I'm in heaven, dancing cheek to cheek. Ho, ho, ho.
He was good, wasn't he? Now we're joined now by YouTuber Saffron, who was a contestant, you remember, on last year's series. Morning. And by TV critic Bryan as well. Morning to you both. Lovely to have you on. Saffron, I remember speaking to you at the time, and part of that, the great thing that you enjoyed about Strictly is that connection with the audience and the lift that you get when you can be feeling a bit nervous sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously the audience was such a great impact, and it also made the show feel so much more real and nerve-wracking. You get those like really excited nerves because there's a live audience there. But having said that, obviously there's still going to be some people in the crowd, and for the pros themselves, it might not be as much of an impact as maybe people think it will be.
Scott, we should say that the BBC haven't sort of guaranteed there'll be a live audience. What they've done is they've said they've opened up the application process. So I suppose there's a hope that it will happen. And they are some of the most heftily sought after tickets, aren't they, from any TV show? But they will be slightly different. We understand if it does go ahead, there'll be like sort of tables with certain people sat around. It won't be crammed in, as anyone who's been to Strictly will know they normally are.
Yeah, I think I've spoken to people who are literally sort of like knee to each other, and it's all sort of rammed in. But the plan is to basically have everybody sort of allowed to go with their bubble, aka within their household or with their partner. So that might be a bit of a nice feeling. But the issue is that it's a challenge that many different channels are facing with many different shows of how can you recreate the audience vibe and really get that sort of participation going when you're also having to adhere to social distancing. And if you look at other shows, like Britain's Got Talent has had audiences beamed in from their home. You've also had, QI have everyone so distant apart, it looks like nobody's turned up. I think everyone's sort of experimenting to see what one's going to work.
Is it a relief, Scott, from a TV critic's point of view, that there will be some sort of audience, hopefully?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the weird thing about it is that I've seen with a few shows in the US that there's been, sometimes no audiences because they had to continue for the whole run. And there's a show called Legendary, which is available, that I watched on HBO Go, and they had to have no audience for the final. But weirdly, that sort of changed the vibe in a good way. It made it a bit more intense, but made under the whole focus. I think I come under an admiration with TV producers who are having to make such creative decisions when the advice changes every single week. And I think it's becoming harder and harder as we go into winter to kind of know how to keep everybody safe. But also you have to provide a show that is, essentially a bit of a distraction, a bit of nonsense that has nothing to do with what we've all been through this year, whilst also still having to adhere to the rules.
Yeah, because Saffron, the show is so busy, isn't it? There are so many people working on it to try and make sure that it's perfect every single weekend. There are runners, there's makeup artists, there's no Blackpool this year. So a lot about the way Strictly is put on will have to change to make it, as Scott says, safe.
Yeah, definitely. But I think just because it's such an iconic show and because they know this, I'm good friends with Maisie and Harvey. A few of the other contestants I don't really know, but I think that's the great thing with the show is obviously you get to know these people and you fall in love with their personality and how much they love to dance. But yeah, I've definitely been in touch with a fair few of them and, you know, giving them any of my top tips that I can.
Scott, it's interesting what you were saying about what it's like to be in the audience, because we were discussing this earlier, and it's so tightly packed on a normal show.
It's intense.
You don't even get a seat. You sort of share half a seat with the person next to you. And I remember I went with my wife, I think, last year, and my wife had a really bad left arm for about a week afterwards because she had to clap at an angle because you can't actually sit straight on. That's how tightly you are crammed in there. And one of the other changes, Scott, is it's going to look slightly different from a judging point of view, isn't it? Explain what's happening with Bruno this year.
Oh, well, I mean, you know, he's just not able really to make it, because he's in the US a lot. So I think that's sort of definitely going to have a different vibe. But I mean, also the audience is going to be different. The fact the band's going to be different. Everyone's going to be socially distant there. You know, they're having to sort of really be creative and think of their feet. But I mean, you know, sometimes they manage to sort of take a show and reinvigorate it because they're having to think around, you know, what they can possibly do. And also, you know, it is a relief, I think, when people see these shows coming back. They've also announced this morning the lineup for Bake Off for this series, which has already been filming because they've been doing that in a big bubble. And I think people are happy being like, right, the normal shows on the Tuesday night and on the Saturday night are returning. We can move on with our lives. That's great.
And just really briefly, as I was putting my makeup on this morning, I was thinking, how are they going to do that with Strictly? Because, you know, they have to. It has to be safe, doesn't it? That's absolutely key. And then, you know, for example, the makeup, the costumes are just incredible, aren't they, Scott?
Yeah, they are. And I think that's what the BBC have been quite cryptic about. They've sort of told about the difficulties and challenges that they've got ahead, but they haven't necessarily answered how they're going to solve them. I think we're just going to have to watch on the first episode, which is good for the BBC because that would give them more ratings.
OK, Scott, Bryan, thank you very much. Saffron, Barker, thanks both.
Have a good day, guys. Thank you very much. And we'll be back tomorrow from 6.
Yep, have a great day. Bye-bye.